Então, hoje é um dia muito especial, a W Futurismo Internacional trouxe Maree Conway, que é uma profissional excelente e uma pessoa muito interessante. Eu recomendo que todos visitem o site da Maree, que depois eu vou colocar aqui no nosso chat. É uma honra ter a Maree aqui. Eu já estudo o trabalho dela há bastante tempo e eu a encontrei no fórum da Unesco de Futures Literacy, que eu sei que alguns de vocês já têm intimidade, outros nem tanto. E o mundo, ele está avançando, eu sempre quero acreditar que para um lugar muito melhor. E agora a gente tem muitos assuntos. Então, esse ano a gente já fez um summit, agora a gente vai trazer pessoas conectadas a estudos de futuros e foresight do mundo inteiro. E hoje é a nossa primeira masterclass, nós temos uma outra em outubro e em novembro, com Marco da Finlândia e Joyce da Itália, com assuntos diferentes. E hoje o nosso tema é mais do que especial, porque a gente vai falar um pouco de possibilidades de futuros para universidades e também como que a gente talvez pode olhar para a nossa preparação profissional, desde preparação de jovens até a nossa reinvenção profissional. Eu acho que isso é um assunto super importante e interessante a partir de agora. Eu fiz o workshop da Maree na Unesco, em Paris, no ano passado, e foi o workshop mais interessante que eu vi por lá, porque ela nos trouxe quatro desenhos diferentes de um mundo daqui para frente em relação à preparação profissional, a universidades, e nós nos dividimos em grupo e eu fiquei muito surpresa com o quanto as pessoas são criativas e com quanto a gente realmente tem futuros alternativos para tudo. Eu sei que tem gente que não participa ainda da W Futurismo, que é nova por aqui, então nós somos um hub de estudos de futuros e nós propagamos o foresight e as metodologias no Brasil e a gente fala de futuros sempre no plural, porque justamente vocês vão ver com a Maree hoje que a gente sempre tem mais do que uma alternativa, mais do que um olhar, e eu estou muito honrada que ela tenha aceitado o nosso convite. Então, é um grande prazer receber a Maree, que é minha colega de Futures Studies e Foresight, e a gente vai falar hoje de muitas perspectivas, de muitos futuros. Ela tem uma pesquisa de doutorado contestada nas universidades e ideias que podem mudar a nossa perspectiva. E eu gostei muito de uma coisa que ela disse, a gente precisa redesenhar e talvez entender qual é o tipo de universidade que o futuro precisa. Mas antes da Maree começar a falar, eu queria falar minimamente sobre ela, e eu espero que eu realmente acerte aqui nessa descrição, mas ela trabalhou em 2 universidades e ela usa foresight estratégico para desenvolvimento e ela ajuda muitas organizações na Austrália. Hoje ela mora em Melbourne, porque Brisbane é muito quente, Queensland é muito quente. E ela ajuda empresas e profissionais a ficarem num estado de prontidão melhor para o futuro. Ela trabalhou durante 28 anos em universidades. Como eu, tem restrições quanto a se chamar de futuristas, porque as pessoas imaginam que futuristas adivinham o futuro. E hoje ela ajuda pessoas e organizações a ter conversas estratégicas sobre o futuro, de forma que a gente vá moldando esse mindset orientado para o futuro, para garantir que as organizações estejam prontas para o futuro e também para que você possa construir esse futuro que você tanto deseja hoje no presente. Então, boa aula para todos que estão aqui. Essa aula vai ficar gravada, faz parte da nossa série de masterclasses. E eu então vou convidar o Welcome Maree Conway, So let me give you a hello. It's a great pleasure to have you here with us. I'm really honored. And this is a great day for us. And I know we will have a great learning session with you. So welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here.
A Maree tem que mudar de sala, Daniel. Maree, you have to change the room again to English.
Got you.
Oh,
is that better?
Great.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. You can open your video if you want, and whenever you want to share your screen, feel free.
It's just saying I can't share my screen. It's disabled.
Wait a moment. Só um minutinho. Okay, let's try now.
Okay. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Let me just put it into. How's that?
We cannot see you.
Okay. Just one moment, please. Sorry.
Okay, don't worry. Momentinho, gente. I can promote to host, not co-host. Do you think it works? Oh, okay. Now we can see. Okay.
You can see it?
Okay, yeah.
Excellent.
Perfect.
There's always a problem at the beginning.
Yes, no, don't worry. We just, is your video open? No.
I've got a slideshow. Can you see that?
No.
You can see my PowerPoint?
Okay. We can see your presentation. I see your name in a small square.
But you can't see my, you can see my presentation though?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Oh,
Go
I'll
ahead.
put my video. I'll put my video in. There I am.
Oh, I can see you now. Perfect. Here we are. I will be here all the time, and in the end we have questions. So take your time, and if you need me, just call me.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here and really excited to be talking to you about the work I've been doing in my PhD on the university's possible futures. Let me just give you a little bit of background. I know Jaqueline already has, but I thought I'll just run through my history again. I had 28 years as the university manager. I discovered foresight at Swinburne University in 1999 when the Vice Chancellor asked me to do foresight, which was an interesting question because I didn't really know what foresight was in a strategic sense then. But since then, I've learned quite a bit. It changed my career path, and I set up Thinking Futures in 2007. I'm about to submit my PhD on contested ideas of the university, and the focus of that and the focus of my work is really around how individual and collective worldviews will shape the futures we accept as valid or that we reject. So for me, this imagining of possible futures begins with our minds and our mindsets. So before we go any further, I would just like to ask you to think about one thing. If I was to ask you, what do you assume that the future will have a university in it, how would you answer? Now, I don't want you to actually answer that question now. I want you to just think about it, and we'll come back to that question at the end of the presentation. So briefly about my research, it was limited to the Western Public University from about 1800, and that was to ensure I could actually get it done. So a lot of universities in many countries and many sectors and parts of the world were left out of my research. So the research question was, how are possible futures for the university enabled or constrained by contested ideas? So the idea is a cultural concept. It's a tacit, unarticulated belief usually about what a university is. Now, in my research, I identified 4 of these contested ideas, and each of those hold a different future for the university. So 3 of them assume that there will be a university in the future, and the 4th assumes the world doesn't need a university anymore, which is a really interesting future to consider. So when you integrate these ideas, we actually get an expanded view of what the future for the university might be like, and that's what we'll talk about today. So this is the context for my research, and yeah, it's a bit complicated. But briefly, the top left-hand corner is where the ideas exist. The top right-hand corner is the context for futures. The bottom right-hand corner is society, where social change happens. And the left-hand bottom corner is the university. So there's 4 domains that we need to be considering when we're thinking about the university's possible futures. Now, I'm not going to go into any detail here because that would take too long, but the fundamental thing for me here is that most of the literature about the university and its futures originates in the bottom half of that diagram below the dotted left-hand line, the dotted red line, sorry. And above that line where we think about the future is rarely, it is used in thinking about the future, but our worldviews and our mindsets are rarely used in that process of imagining possible futures for the university. So that's the critical point, and that's what I was trying to do in my thesis, to bring together our mindsets with our action and decision making in the present. So there are these 4 ideas. They shape what we believe to be true about the university in the present and in the future as well. Here are the 4 ideas. I'll quickly run through them. The traditional idea is the university of the past, the German university of the 1800s, that was granted a kind of normative legitimacy by the state at that time to go forth and educate the elite, search for truth, and academics could work in quiet reflection in their own time and space. So essentially this was a university left alone by the state. It was a university that academics came to see as their university, our university. There was some interesting quotes in the literature about how strongly academics felt about people trying to tell them what to do with their university. The second idea is the managerial idea, and this is the dominant idea at the moment. This is manifested in the neoliberal university from around 1990, the one we're all pretty familiar with. This is the university that is granted legitimacy by the government, and essentially it's a university that has to obey, that has to meet all government requirements to ensure that it survives. The reframed idea actually emerges from the ashes of the traditional idea. It's emergent. It's people who are trying to establish new university forms outside the neoliberal university and outside that structure that constrains the university today. So some of these universities are now being established as cooperative universities. Their aim is to adapt the values of the traditional idea and reframe them for the present, seeing learning happening in society rather than in a government bureaucratic neoliberal structure. So for me, that's a university that's been redesigned. The fourth idea is the dismissive idea, and it's called pre-emergent because it's emerging and we're seeing signals about this idea. It believes that because universities have no value now, because they're too expensive, they don't get people's jobs, people can access learning and knowledge outside the university structure for free or very low cost, all those sorts of factors, that we don't actually need a university anymore, especially when the education and the learning and the research that's going on in universities doesn't appear to be helping us address the global challenges that we have at the moment. So this is an idea that sees a future without a university as we understand it in the present. So it's a university no more. So this is how they emerged over time. The traditional idea was dominant from the 1800s to around World War II. And from World War II, the managerial ideas started to emerge. That's shown by the orange dotted line. So when the managerial idea became dominant, the traditional idea started to wane. It's still around. People resist the managerial idea in the neoliberal university quite vigorously. So the power of the traditional idea is still there in people's hearts and minds, but not in reality. So the reframed idea started to emerge around 2000. And then the dismissive idea is entirely outside the university. The other three emerged within or took shape within the university, but the dismissive idea emerged outside the university completely. So these four ideas give us two assumptions. One is that there will always be a university, and two, that the university has passed its use-by date and it's no longer relevant. Now, both those ideas are valid depending on the idea you hold about what a university is. And if you believe that the university has always existed, it's existed back to pre-medieval times, then why wouldn't it not exist? So this is the question we'll address after the presentation. So in my research, I did some scenario analysis, and I found 91 scenarios about the future university from 27 items of literature, and I summarized them by idea. So then I wrote these little summaries here. And this is a table that tells us how each of these four ideas views the future for itself and the other ideas. So if you work across the table, for example, the traditional idea will have an idea of its future, and it will have a reaction to the assumed futures, or to the futures for the other three ideas. So that when you're working across, it's how the traditional idea sees the other ideas. When you work down, you'll have an understanding of how the other ideas see the traditional idea. So, excuse me. So this analysis, or this classification, gives us 6 possible futures, or really only 5. There's one that the reframed idea in yellow will be able to take on the values of the traditional idea, so there is a possible future there. The managerial idea assumes that as long as it stays fit for purpose, it will continue to exist. The university in the reframed idea is new, different, outside society. And it also has the potential to work with those people who hold the dismissive idea, which is the one saying we don't need a university, we want learning in and for society. So you can see there's some possible futures in this analysis that emerge. What I did then, though, was I recategorized them by archetype. So we have some archetypal futures. These are the archetypes developed by Jim Data, the US futurist, and there's 4 types. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, so I'll run through them quickly. Continuation is, sorry, I should say first that the archetypes represent clustering of those 91 scenarios into these archetypes. So when you look at the scenarios through the archetype lens, you come up with a different analysis. So the continuation archetype is that life goes on with very little change. The discipline archetype is one that emerges, a future that emerges when society has had some sort of challenge, significant challenge, and universities and organisations and people have to adapt to be able to continue to survive. So that could be a very significant adaptation, or it could be less so, but it represents a significant change from the present. Dissent is where there's a system breakage and the established way of doing things doesn't work anymore. And whenever I look at our current environment, I often think that this might be the future path we're on, unless we can change our thinking and reframe what we do in the world and in our societies. It breaks, the system breaks. So you can't do what you always did. You have to actually make some sort of major change to what you do. Over time, the system will usually decline. And so your options for people in this kind of future is to move to a discipline future or to transform completely. A transformational future is one where what you know is gone and you have to totally begin from scratch. So totally new ways of doing things emerge. So they're the four archetypes. And when I clustered the idea of futures by archetype, I got this. So what this shows is that each idea has more than one, except for the dismissive idea, each idea has more than one archetypal future, and they intersect with the futures of other ideas. So rather than assuming that each idea has this linear future and that's it, we can see here that actually there's a lot more going on if you allow the ideas to merge and cross and intersect, rather than considering them as individual ideas, which is how they're considered at the moment in the literature. So now, if you use the ideas which are on the first column and you run them against each of the four archetypes, you can see that not all ideas have futures, because the traditional idea and the university, the modern university of Germany in the 1800s, 1900s, doesn't exist anymore. So there's nothing to continue. And if there's nothing to continue, there's nothing to transform. The dissent and discipline futures that exist there are very fragile futures, very fragile. They might succeed, they might not. The managerial idea, you see, assumes a continuation future, but if it moves into a dissent future, it will struggle to survive. If society moves to a more open, inclusive framing, that's oppositional to the managerial idea. It could move into a discipline future, as it describes here, but that would be a bit of a struggle as well. No transformation future for that. Oh, sorry. The reframed idea is the only one that has four possible futures. So here the academics and society work together to develop new universities that provide learning in society to meet social needs and challenges. So a continuation one, they would continue to emerge and gain strength. They would, I'll move over to discipline. If something happened and they had to adjust, they could easily become a smaller university sector within society. If we went into a dissent future for this reframed idea, it could still survive That's my analysis anyway. We can talk about that. We can argue or talk or discuss about that later. And the transformation one was where boundaries between society and university dissolved, and they could still exist in that type of future as well. The dismissive idea only has that kind of transformation feature because it doesn't exist at all in the present, at the moment, except in the form of a few weak signals. But the reframed idea and the dismissive idea have some connections, and this idea of learning in society for society might become quite strong. And if that happens, then do we need a university as we understand it today? I think that's a really important question to ask so that we can challenge some of the assumptions that we all have about what sort of future the university has. So towards the end of my thesis, I thought, well, that's all really nice. I've done all that nice work, but so what? So I've developed this conversation framework about how we can come together and talk about possible futures for the university in ways that value all futures, excuse me, all futures and all ideas. So we seek not to dismiss people as being wrong. We try to be more open and more inclusive and collaborative in how we think about the future university. Because one of the things in the research, and we can talk about this later too, is that I could feel, if that makes sense, I could almost feel the depth of feeling that people have about the university. It's strong. You can get it out of the literature if you read between the lines, that people really care about the university and its futures. They want it to continue to exist, but whether it can or not, that's the question. So this was the framework I didn't develop it, I borrowed it from integral futures, integral theory, which says that you have to consider these four quadrants. This is an adaptation of integral theory, I have to mention, but it says that you have to consider these four quadrants to be able to understand the issue or the problem that you're trying to understand. So the upper left quadrant is individual consciousness. So this is us and what happens up here in our brains. And that's where we hold our beliefs about the future. The lower left quadrant, the cultural context, is organizational culture. So that's where individuals come together and work together in organizations, and a culture emerges over time. The lower left quadrant is the social system in which universities exist. And this is the space where legitimacy is generated and granted to the university. So the upper right quadrant for me is organizational processes where we come together as individuals to have conversations in processes in the organization to help us think about and imagine possible futures. So again, we have this invisible side of the university and the visible side of the university. And when you think about strategic planning in universities now, or in any organization really, the effort and the thinking is on the right-hand side. Rarely does it seriously move into the left-hand side. So on the left-hand side, what we're trying to do in this process is develop individual and collective futures consciousness. So we want the future to be top of mind when we're thinking about strategy and action and decision making in the present. And on the right-hand side, we want the organisation to be oriented to the future, so that in its processes and the decision making processes as well are oriented to the future, and the future is always considered before taking action. For university futures, this is what it looks like. So the upper left is where I have my idea, the individual, the idea thought. So we all have an idea up here. The green lower left quadrant is where the idea is signified, where you can start to see indicators of what the idea is in that particular culture. At the lower right, the social system, which is about finding the university's purpose and legitimacy, understanding change that's shaping the future of the university. And the upper right quadrant is the conversations that we need to have, because this is the only quadrant where people actually come together and have these conversations. And ultimately that's about finding the university the future needs, not the one that we want, not the one that a particular idea wants, but we need to find the university the future needs. And that might be a future without a university, or it might be a future with a university that looks very different to what we have today. So the purple box in the middle just describes the type of discourse that I think we need to be working towards. One that's open, collaborative, integrated, values all ideas and all futures, and it takes this and builds this longer term perspective. So I asked at the end of my thesis these questions, which were designed to illustrate in a very superficial way what might happen if the ideas actually broke down their barriers and came together and thought about the future the university needs. So could the managerial and traditional ideas, these oppositional ideas, actually talk together and create some sort of future? I doubt it, but you know, it's a possibility. The managerial and reframed ideas, could they find common ground? What university might emerge if that happened? The reframed ideas, what would happen if they actually did merge? What would happen then to learning in universities? So you want people who want a university, and you want people who don't want a university, but ultimately what they want is learning in society. What would happen then? And what would happen if all four ideas merged? If people said, look, we've got these four ideas, let's have a conversation about them. If there was an assumption that the university might not exist in the future, very important. And if the starting point is to find the university the future needs, not the one that an idea wants or that I want, what sort of university might emerge then? And that's what I think the question really is. We need to stop thinking about the university I want or what I believe in, and we can only do that if we surface our assumptions and think about them and focus on what university will the future need. All right, so at the beginning of the question, at the beginning of the presentation, I asked, do you think the university will always exist? So I'd just be interested now, I've finished the presentation now, we can have a conversation now about your answers to that, but also anything else you'd like to ask or comment or reflect on. Thank you very much. I've just put
Maree, can you hear me? Okay. Let me see if you are there. Maree, are you there? Eu acho que ela caiu, gente. Tem uma pergunta da Camila Nara Martinez, que eu já vou fazer assim que ela voltar. Eu não sei se ela está me escutando, mas, obviamente, a gente vai dividir essa apresentação com vocês. E eu queria saber um pouquinho quais são as dúvidas de vocês. Ela mostrou um estudo que ela fez bastante amplo e que nos mostram, sim, mais do que uma possibilidade de futuros. E a gente vê que, na verdade, o que existiu até agora provavelmente vai mudar radicalmente. A pandemia é um desses futuros de colapso, onde talvez a gente tenha que fazer mudanças de uma forma mais acelerada. Gostei muito de quando ela fala de quando não há mais nada, quando não há mais um valor, não há mais o que transformar. E eu vejo que isso... Deixa eu só colocá-la de novo.
Hello.
Hi, Maree.
I'm not sure what happened there, but...
Oh, it's okay. You are back. That's fine. which your video is not open. So we have question, and I was talking to them that this is it's very interesting when you show that we can change nothing and then we can adapt, reframe, maybe think in no universities in future.
Yes.
But this framework, this analysis that just keep what is not full of value anymore, it's not a smart thing. And think in no universities is maybe not a good path. So reframe seems a great choice for all of us and for universities, and we have to build it together. This is what I understood. I have some questions here.
Yes.
First question is from Camila. What are the most common biases between the universities? If you don't understand, feel free to ask Camila.
So in terms of the ideas, I'm assuming.
I think.
Yeah. The most literature is about the traditional idea and the managerial idea. There's a small literature set about the dismissive idea, but it is new. It's growing. It's growing. So if it continues to grow, then it will become influential, stronger than it is now. The reframed idea is present and it's already being enacted, but it's still not influential in the discourse because the government controls the discourse at the moment. Yes. The traditional idea exists in what I call a resistance mode. So it's still alive because people do care about the university and they want to challenge this new, this neoliberal university. So it lives on. So there's still that the most dominant ideas are the traditional and the managerial, but the reframed idea is getting stronger really quickly. Yeah.
Yes, and I see the traditional people, they have emotional connections, cultural connections, and it's okay. And I see in UNESCO workshop, there was a huge group in no universities in the future and the other group in reframed and no one in traditional. Of course, yes. We are thinking in the future, but yes. It's very interesting that
I was surprised. Yeah, it's interesting.
Okay. I have another question from Maria Candida. Great insights, Maree. When I think about university, majority of thoughts are around the learn journey. What about the network, socializing, changing experience journey? What's your perspective regarding this around the university experience? Ela congelou de novo, será? Maree? Vou tirar o vídeo, mas eu acho que ela congelou de novo. Uma das coisas importantes, ela já vai voltar para poder responder. Eu queria que vocês colocassem... Camila, espero que a sua pergunta tenha sido respondida. Sim, eu acho que aqui no Brasil, as universidades tradicionais estão tentando manter as coisas na força ainda. E claro que também o movimento de um governo tradicional, ele vai tentar prestigiar o tradicional, mas esse futuro reframed e o no university, eles são em velocidades diferentes, intensidades diferentes, mas o reframed, ele está vivo já e o outro está ganhando força. Eu não tenho nenhuma dúvida.
Sorry.
Maree,
sorry, no, I think...
If you prefer without video, it's okay. Have you heard the question?
Sorry, I think my internet connection is dropping out, but hopefully it won't this time.
Okay, I will repeat the question, okay?
Yeah.
It's from Maria Candida. Great insights, Maree. When I think about university, majority of thoughts are around the learn journey. What about the network, socializing, changing experience journey? What's your perspective regarding this around the university experience?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I didn't go anywhere near that area in my research, but just from my own experience, I think that the managerial idea, the experience that people have in the university of the managerial idea, but well, I'm making assumptions here, but both for students and for staff is not optimal. People who work in universities now often tell me that they're toxic environments to work in. I think that the reframed idea that networking, that collaborative, that more integrative and socially focused experience would be very different, a very different experience, both for learning and for people working in the university. The dismissive idea, I have no idea because it's not yet fully formed. We don't know what structures will be needed for learning in that sort of future. But I'm sure there's people out there who are working on that. Yeah. So yeah, for me, that's really important. That experience, whether you're there as a learner or as a worker. And I was in there for 28 years. And when I started, it was the traditional idea. And when I finished, it was the managerial idea. So I saw it through that transition, and the experience was very, very different. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Camila is asking again if universities analyze disruptive forces. And with this question, my question is, how works foresight in universities? Did they really talk about this and use methodologies or not, even in Australia?
I think, that diagram I showed you, the integral futures one, the left-hand and right-hand side, and I said strategic planning exists on the right-hand side. So universities, when they use futures approaches, will stay on the left-hand side. I think most organisations will stay on the right-hand side, which is the realm of facts and data and that kind of thing. So when,
like a big company.
Yes, yeah. And when looking at disruptive forces and changes, external changes that are shaping their futures, they will look for the data, look for the trends, which is fine. Look for the driving forces, but they don't, and I think this is true of most organisations that use foresight and futures approaches. I'm thinking here particularly of scenario development processes. Rarely, unless you have good facilitators and good people running that process, rarely move deeply into the left-hand side, into the realm of what we think and our assumptions, and challenging those assumptions about the future. The last session I did in a university, a professor said to me, "This is really hard because it's not real. How can we have a future without a university? That's not going to happen."
Yes.
And I thought, and I said to him, "Well, keep going. Please, just think about it, accept that it's real, and see what you come up with." But they were very unhappy. So yeah. They do look at disruptive forces, but not deeply enough. Yeah.
Yes, great. I have another question from Marcelo, and let me see. Google recently said it will have they will have a university, Google University. Would this be a trend? Large corporations adopting specific and universal titles?
Yes, potentially. Here in Australia, you can't do that because the word university is, the use of the word university is controlled. But that idea that you can learn outside the university structure is an indicator of the dismissive idea. So that Google doing that has signaled that this is okay to do, I think. And there are organizations now that run their own corporate universities, particularly in America, in the States. So it's not new to have universities outside the formal university structure. But now that Google's done that, I think that's like, you know, as they say, it's the thin end of the wedge, you know, they've cracked it open, and it'll probably keep opening, I think. Yeah.
We have banks in Brazil like Fundação Bradesco. They are like a university, and we have IBM also, and we have another platform here in Brazil. The name is, let me tell you, just to answer Marcelo, 42SP. You go in alone, you choose everything you want, there is no teacher, and it's very interesting. But they don't have this social and network, social connection, network connection, cultural connection. So I think this is a part of the learning, not all the learning you by yourself all the time. So okay.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Alessandra is another question. We have time just for more 2 or 3, maybe, if you have time. Alessandra, sure. Do you believe that we could return to Plato era, where the masters were chosen by us?
Yes. Why not? I mean, I think some of the scenarios, yeah, a couple of the scenarios that I looked at actually were like that. There was a scenario. There was a scenario where academics lived on farms or in particular places, and then the students came to them. So I think that idea is not outrageous. I think it's a real possibility.
Yeah. In your workshop, I clearly see with my group that maybe some universities can go into companies, or an example, medicine can go into hospital to learn, not at the university, maybe. Or a hospital can have a big university. That's okay.
Yes, definitely. Okay. I think anything like that needs to be considered. Yeah.
Okay, we have a next question from Patricia. Just more 2 after that, if you agree.
Yep.
In countries like Brazil, where private universities are a source of business, how will the reinvention of the study teaching model not find the financial issue? Profitability is a delay factor for the disruption of the current model. I think she's asking how money will find all of this, or go behind of this, or down, I don't know. Because in private universities, money is the main focus.
Yes, yeah. I think that's an issue for all universities now, and all university-like organizations. Where is the money coming from? Dependence on the government for funding is the biggest challenge, I think, that most universities face. Most universities here in Australia get the majority of their funding from non-government sources, but they are regulated by the government. So that relationship proves to be quite difficult. Yeah, and in private universities, yeah, it's all about, let's just get students in and take their money. That's been very, very unnice to them. But yeah, but they exist. They exist to make money and profits for their owners. Yeah.
Do you think private and public universities, they work differently or not?
Oh, definitely in terms of their strategy, I think, yeah. I've worked with a couple of private universities who while they want students to have a good learning experience while they're there, that ultimately they have to make money or they won't exist. Particularly if they're part of global consortia, as there are at the moment. There are some private universities that exist all over the world and managed centrally, and they would have to perform and meet targets and things like that. So it's a very different culture, I think, to work in. Even though I think the culture around the students would be the same.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I have two last questions and then just 3 sentences, the short one. First, Maria Candida, what are the countries leading the transition, if you know this answer?
I think maybe in Europe. I went to a conference in Denmark a few years ago where I learned more about the dismissive idea and the reframed idea, and that's where these cooperative universities have been set up. But also there's some in the US that have been established for a long time that were just outliers or outsiders to the main university system, which might now be finding a home. But I think I could find out the names of the universities and the countries they're in, but I'd need to look that up. I don't have that.
Yeah,
top of mind at the moment.
maybe
Yeah.
Finland also, I don't know, but I think Australia or not.
No. I was trying to think desperately of somewhere, and there might be one or two, I think. But yeah,
a lot of misunderstood of Finland, I know, but okay.
Yeah.
Okay, the last question for our audience. It's from Marina. We have universities working with nano degrees. The work in the form of microformation within formation. I believe the result of this transformation education maybe put nano degrees together with university. I don't know, but in your research, we dealt with legitimacy. What would be the signs of the legitimacy of transformation of learning? What will legitimize professionals? Won't we have more professionals in the future? This was a question in our workshop at UNESCO.
The nano degrees are interesting, and many universities now are developing them and call them micro credentialing. So, you do these short courses that are linked together, and then you get a qualification at the end. Yeah. And sorry, what was the last one? The legitimacy of.
Do we have professionals in the future, and who will say they are good or bad professionals, qualified or not?
Yeah. Interesting question. And I think, yeah, when I talk about this, people always say, well, what about doctors and lawyers and people like that who need to be certified to qualify, to practice, sorry. And that's true, but I did some work on the future of learning a few years ago for a UK organisation, and one of the things that came up there was the use of artificial intelligence and blockchain to allow certification to occur in real time. And there already is virtual autopsy boards and other virtual reality techniques that can be used in training. So if that developed further, then you could see other ways for doctors to be qualified and certified, for instance. As you complete a topic online, it's accepted or not accepted, so you move on or you don't move on. I mean, that's already happening now. But I don't know the answer to that question. It's one everybody always asks. I should probably do some research and try and find out what the answer is. It's a really good question, but I think we can't say it won't happen because these people need to be certified in, you know, in practice, in person. We just need to break that open and say what else is possible rather than closing the question down.
Yes. Okay. So the last three sentences, they are very easy. So I know what government has to do. I know what people from university, what they should do and how we can promote this debate. If you are a mother of a young person, what should this mother do, in your opinion?
Oh, that's interesting. It's been a long time since I was a mother of a young person.
A young son now, or a young...
Yeah. I think I would be trying to encourage an approach to learning that was very open and not depend on the school system and the university system, if it still existed, to foster that love of learning that you need, and also to be able to question, I think, is really important for learning and moving through society. You know, to question things, you know, why is it like this? Why is it so? To never accept things at face value, to understand that what we see isn't all there is, that reality is layered, and our mindsets are equally as important as what we see. And so to cultivate this open, challenging, questioning mindset, I think, would be my first goal. Yeah.
That's great. If we have here a teacher, a university teacher, what should he think about from now on?
Oh, I think he should be scared.
Okay.
A lot of university teachers now in existing universities are having a really hard time of it. You know, their idea of the university is gone and they exist in this kind of, this world that just doesn't make sense to many people except the government. Yeah, I think it's the same thing. Instead of saying I want my university to exist, my university is the right university, we should be saying, well, my university's gone. I have to accept that. If I don't want to work in this university, what sort of university do I want to work in? And that's what the reframed idea people have done. They've coalesced around that question. It doesn't have to be like this. What do we want it to be like? Yeah.
And they can reframe everything. So
yes.
Great.
Yeah.
And the last one, before I wrap up our session, for the professionals who are losing jobs or who are in the middle of this innovation and transformation, when we are adults, sometimes we don't go back to universities, but from now on, all of us have to look to the future and reframe ourselves, our careers, our job. For the professionals, do you have any advice if you want? Because I know that futurists don't like to do this. I don't like it.
No. I think too, I always come back to ensuring that we allow our brains to be open to the future. I did some research around the neurology of thinking about the future, which is really quite interesting because our brains actually have the capacity and the structures to let us think about the future, but we close them down because we say, well, that's not real. I don't believe that. We let our biases and assumptions get in the way. So I think for any professional, the best thing that we can do is work to open our view of the world. You know, that saying about one door closes, another door opens, but you only see the door if you're looking for it. It's the same with the future. You only see the future if you're looking for it. If you believe that the future is predetermined and this is what it will be like, then you're not looking for alternatives. And it's the same for a professional looking to think about their future. There isn't one linear pathway into the future. There are many, but you have to go out and find them.
Yes. That's a great advice, because when the doors open, if you don't see it,
a missed opportunity. Yeah.
Okay. So Maree, thank you. I just would talk in Portuguese a little bit. If you want to go to the other room, feel free, and then we close our session. So, então eu vou só dar uma geral aqui. Oh, let me change my. Okay. Eu vou dar uma geral aqui, porque a realidade das universidades não é que ela vai mudar, ela já mudou. Eu gosto muito de, se eles fizessem talvez foresight para ver 3 horizontes, eles já teriam visto que está em decadência, como a gente pode fazer esse reframe, e talvez eles mesmos pudessem criar essas universidades do futuro, isso não precisaria vir de Google. Jovens e adultos precisam se reinventar, e isso de quando fecha uma porta, várias outras se abrem, mas você tem que estar atento. Se você tem um futuro pré-determinado na sua cabeça, você não vai enxergar os caminhos alternativos. Eu acho que isso de reenquadrar, redesenhar a universidade é o grande caminho que a gente tem agora. O futuro sem universidade está aquecendo também essa conversa. Ninguém sabe essa resposta. Penso que a pandemia é um dos eventos que talvez trouxe esse cenário de colapso do Jim Dator, que quem faz foresight sabe, mas um cenário que força algumas coisas porque entra em colapso. Os jovens não sabem o que dizer aos pais nessa época, mas eles não querem mais repetir os modelos anteriores, gastar um tempo na universidade. A opção tem sido, segundo minhas entrevistas, viajar, navegar pelo mundo, entrar no mercado, aprender um pouco e depois talvez escolher. Temos que planejar sempre com mais de um cenário. Quando a coisa morreu, não tem mais o que transformar, a gente precisa aceitar que morreu e aí criar as coisas novas. A parte boa da universidade é que ela faz parte da nossa história, ela faz com que a gente se encontre, ela desenvolve o network, a integração, a interação, e a gente não precisa perder nada disso, desde que a gente não entenda mais que universidade é um lugar onde eu vou adquirir conhecimento, porque isso você adquire o tempo todo. Temos muitos desafios, as universidades têm um elo forte com a sociedade, a turma da resistência tem vínculo emocional com a universidade. Eu acho que a gente pode criar universidades maravilhosas, e eu acho que de lição para todo mundo que está ouvindo, que fica hoje com a aula da Maree, a gente precisa promover mais debates em torno desse assunto, porque a sociedade precisa contar para a universidade o que ela precisa, para que a universidade possa encontrar esse futuro que a sociedade precisa, assim como funciona com as organizações. So, Maree, deixa eu voltar. Maree, I really would like to thank you so much for this amazing class. And it was an honor for us, and I'm very happy that we spend this time for you. We can have you here with all your knowledge, and it's a great honor. If you want to say your last words for our students.
Thank you very much for the invitation. As I said, I think this topic for me is going to become a strong focus in my work. I think now that we need, as you said, we need to work together in social ways to adapt the university rather than just see what happens. Yeah.
Yes.
So good luck, everybody. And thank you again. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Okay, thank you, Maree. So, thank you one more time. A todos vocês, muito obrigada pela audiência de hoje. A gente vai terminando a nossa Masterclass. E que vocês pensem em promover esse debate e ajudar diferentes gerações a pensar em futuros alternativos. Vamos reenquadrar o que a gente tem para ficar melhor. Obrigada. Nosso tradutor Daniel, muito obrigada. E eu espero que todos levem esses assuntos de futuro muito a sério, porque o futuro das universidades e o futuro das corporações está aí na pauta para valer. Obrigada a todos, uma boa noite. Good night, Maree. Daniel, go ahead.
Bye-bye. Thank you.